What's good, Deck Gang? Are you still hungover from that Steam spring sale? It was the best sale I'd seen in a while and had shades of sales from the early days of Steam where you could get AAA bangers for under $5. I mean, I still can't believe Jedi Fallen Order was only $4. Anyway, this week's Tech News Roundup is full of awesome news. We're going to get into Diablo 4, Resident Evil 4, Windows on Deck updates, future updates for EmuDeck, and a critical new feature that's now available on Steam Deck. It's a feature that modern consoles all have, but Steam Deck was missing it, so I can't wait to tell you all about it. So let's get into it. First things first, let's talk Steam Deck news. If you're still itching for Steam Deck game deals, then Fanatical has a brand new on-the-go bundle filled with games that are Steam Deck verified. You can pick up 3 games for $4.99, 5 games for $6.99, or 8 games for $10. There are some really underrated games on here. Personally, I can give really high recommendations for Iconoclast, Gone Home, and Splasher. If you're only going to get 3 games, those should be the ones. But Cyberhook, Door Kickers Action Squad, Ghost 1.0, and Speed Limit are all fun games too. So if you're looking for some more games to play on your deck, check the link in the description. As I mentioned, the Steam Spring Sale ended last week, and that came with the first ever 10% discount to the Steam Deck itself. Anecdotally speaking, that resulted in a surge of new viewers to this channel, so I'm pretty confident that that's going to be reflected in the Steam Deck sales numbers, so I look forward to seeing the Steam hardware survey in the next couple of months. If you happen to be one of the people that bought a Steam Deck right before the sale, then hopefully you submitted a support request on Steam because many viewers reported that they were able to get a price adjustment from Valve after doing so. It's great of Valve to honor that sale price for people that bought just before that window. I'm not really surprised they did it considering how nice their refund policy is for games. Valve's customer support isn't perfect, but it remains one of the best in the business. Of course, that Steam Deck sale came alongside a bunch of other big news that I covered in my last video, but most notably was the Steam Deck coming to retail shops in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Notably, that 10% discount also applied if you bought the Steam Deck in one of those shops, which did come as a surprise to me. It definitely has me wondering how much margin Valve currently has on the Steam Deck, and don't forget, they set these prices like 2 years ago. They've evidently seen their costs come down, so the only question remaining is, by how much? I did happen to find these pictures of what the demo Steam Deck looked like in one of the Acer Predator Pro shops, and it looks a bit more quaint than I was expecting, but still really nice. The games being demonstrated here appear to be Melty Blood Type Lumina and Elden Ring. I wonder what else might be installed on these decks. As an aside, a user on the Fandid Deck Discord that goes by the name of Star Kitten made these mockups of what a retail box could look like for the Steam Deck, and I think they look pretty cool. Quick question, do retail boxes still have those screenshots of games on the back of the box? I don't know if they do, but it would be fun to see that for a Steam Deck box. What do you think? Here's a quick Steam Deck story. There's a new APU driver available for those of you with Windex. I don't know of too many people that primarily use Windows on Steam Deck, but if you're one of the dozens that do, then be sure to get this update since according to Valve, it includes various compatibility, security, stability, and performance improvements for Windows on Steam Deck. My heart will always be with SteamOS, but I do want to make an updated Windeck video for 2023, so maybe now is the time. Let's see. Next up is the biggest release of the week with Resident Evil 4. As usual for big releases, Valve has prepared for the launch of this title as shown with this tweet from Pierre Liu. He indicates that Proton Experimental has key fixes for RE4 and is set by default, so you don't have to do anything here. You do want to make sure that you're on the latest SteamOS, which is SteamOS 3.4.6, since that also contains important fixes for the game, in this case probably shader caches. With these fixes on hand, I would say that Resident Evil 4 performs well. Once I lowered the settings and set FSR2 to quality, I didn't see any frame rates below 30. With settings turned all the way down and FSR2 set to ultra performance, you can get up to 60 frames per second. Overall, this is a game that does great with the 40Hz refresh rate on the Steam Deck, so that's what I'm going to be rocking. You're probably well informed by now, but generally speaking, I would say that this remake delivers and is well worth the purchase if you're already a fan or looking to see what all the fuss is about. I don't know yet if I prefer the remake or the original, but I'm just happy to have another reason to play one of the best games of all time. Of course, it seems I'm not alone as Resident Evil 4 has become the most successful Resident Evil game on Steam if we're measuring that by concurrent players. As of writing, it's reached over 130,000 concurrent players, which is 30% more than RE Village and almost double the Resident Evil 2 remake. Quick side note, a friend of mine introduced me to Save Room, which is an inventory management puzzle game inspired by Resident Evil. It's $2.99, so I'm just going to pick this up and try it out. Let me know if you try it out too. Outside of RE4, the biggest game that people wanted to try on Steam Deck last week was the Diablo 4 beta, and it does in fact play well on Steam Deck. I'm going to link a video by GameTech Planet who manages to cover how well it plays on both SteamOS and Windows in a tight 5.5 minutes. For SteamOS, you will still need to install this via battle.net, and GameTech Planet says you'll need Proton GE 7-27, but according to Steam Deck HQ, Proton GE 7-51 seems like the way to go for now. I'm happy to hear it's running well since Steam Deck is the perfect platform for dungeon crawlers like this one. I'm also glad that this appears to have none of the gross monetization that its mobile counterpart does. Thankfully, Diablo 4 just seems like a worthy entry into the series. The last game-related update for this week is the March 22nd update for Proton Experimental, which includes fixes for Black Ops 3, so something to look out for if you need your COD fix. Overkill.wtf did an interview with the developers of EmuDeck. There's a lot of good stuff there, so check the link in the description for that. One of the things they talked about is what's next for EmuDeck, so I want to highlight a couple key points. First of all, they're looking to tighten things up and add various quality of life improvements, including various UI tweaks. They're also going to be adding some new emulators, including the app image for CEMU and RetroArch cores for the Pico 8 and TIC 80, which are both fantasy computers with a huge cult following, and many interesting homebrew games, including the original Game Jam version of Celeste, which still holds up, mind you. Interestingly, they're exploring ways to enable use of EmuDeck in gaming mode, which can allow you to make configurations without having to go back to desktop mode. And finally, there are ports of EmuDeck coming for Android and Windows. They stress that SteamOS remains the primary focus and is going to get new features first. Personally, I welcome this because, as I've said before, I've tried a lot of different front-end solutions for my retro collection, and EmuDeck has just been my favorite so far. One important thing I want to note from the interview is this quote here. One of the developers said, quote, "Game preservation is very important, but I want to remind everyone that piracy isn't cool. Buy what you play, people, and please stop asking for help with downloading games." End quote. The reason I want to call this out here is because I've been to the EmuDeck Discord, and the developers and the community there are some of the most helpful I've ever seen. Please don't exhaust their patience by asking questions about where or how to download games. They already have their hands full with requests that have nothing to do with that. Here's a story that's only barely related to the Steam Deck, but you'll see why I'm including it here soon. Linus Media Group, the network behind mega popular YouTube channels such as Linus Tech Tips and Tech Linked, were hacked last week. That resulted in those channels being hijacked by the perpetrators and those channels then being used to propagate scams. Thankfully, it all got resolved, and Linus made a video explaining what happened and what could be done to improve things for the future. It's a fascinating video and well worth a watch, so I'm going to leave a link in the description, but one thing that might be helpful for the Deck Gang is that Dbrand sponsored this video, and they made their first ever store-wide discount of 15%. Dbrand is not sponsoring my video, by the way. I just wanted to point that out because I never see Dbrand sales, and this could be a good time for you to pick up a new skin or the Project Kill Switch. Check out the info in the description to learn more about that sale. And one more thing before we get into the main story of today, I love a chance to spotlight something from the Steam Deck community, whether it's a video, accessory, or some new software. Today, I want to recommend this video from Greer Jackson. The title is Steam Deck Made Me Love Gaming Again, and she covers the Steam Deck from all angles, including ergonomics, customization, emulation, and more. I just found this to be a really good video with really great production quality, and Greer has super smooth delivery, so yeah, check it out. By the way, if you're finding this video helpful, hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more Steam Deck news. The main story for today is a feature that I've been wanting since the release of the Steam Deck, and I didn't think we were going to get it, but now it's here. And I know a lot of you watching this video right now follow the Steam Deck as closely as I do, and you must be saying to yourself, but Richard, Valve didn't release any new updates. What are you talking about? Well, my friend, you are right. The Steam Deck community did what Valve didn't, and that mantra doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well as Nintendo, but it doesn't make it any less true. There is a new update to the Decky Recorder plugin, and it adds the ability to save the past 30 seconds of gameplay footage just like the Nintendo Switch does. In fact, it looks like it's keeping a buffer of up to 5 minutes, and you can save all of that from within the quick access menu. This is incredibly cool, and even better, they use a Steam shortcut so you can just press Steam plus Y to save your clip. It's incredibly well done, and it feels like a native feature. Well, except for the fact that it's kind of a pain to get your saved clips, and the best way to do it is either from within desktop mode or with another Decky Loader plugin that gives you access to your files. Outside of that though, it's great. If you're worried about installing plugins, I would say it's not a big deal. The installation process is easy and it doesn't slow down your games. There are a few warnings I would issue with regard to plugins. Number one is that I wouldn't recommend using plugins if you're on the beta or preview channel for SteamOS. Plugins work much better when you're on the stable channel. Number two is that even though they don't slow down your games, they can slow down your Steam gaming mode menu. The Steam Deck keeps a small amount of resources free to run the gaming mode UI, and the more plugins you install, the more you're going to be taxing those limited resources, which could result in sometimes severe lag, but for the menu only. The third and final warning I would issue with regard to plugins is that sometimes they can be buggy and they don't get the same quality control that Valve is able to give to SteamOS itself. For example, after I installed Decky Recorder, the Steam Deck woke itself up from sleep a couple times. I can't be certain that Decky Recorder caused this, but I'd never seen that before, and so it seems plausible, to say the least, that Decky Recorder or some other plugin is at fault here. Those are my warnings, and I think they're pretty small considering the benefit you get from some plugins, with Decky Recorder being the latest example. Recording the last 30 seconds at the very least is something that's available in all modern consoles, and I'm glad to see it finally hit the Steam Deck, even if it is in an unofficial capacity. I'm going to get a lot of use out of this one, and I imagine that a lot of you will too. I also happen to see plugins and other homebrew software as a tease of what's possible on the Steam Deck, and therefore what Valve may implement as an official feature somewhere down the line. Do you think Valve will be adding the ability to save clips from the Steam Deck, maybe even allow you to upload clips using the Media tab? Or do you think Decky Recorder is going to be the only way to have a feature like this? Let me know in the comments. So that was a whole lot of Steam Deck news, but there was a ton of gaming and tech news too, not to mention some more new releases. We have to start with the big news from Valve. Counter-Strike 2 is official and coming this summer. Once again, Valve proves that they're allergic to the number 3 because, logically speaking, they had about as much reason to call this Counter-Strike 3 as they did to call it Counter-Strike 2. Either way, I'm really excited about this. I'm a majorly lapsed CS player. I used to play a lot back in the 1.6 days, which of course is how I ended up using Steam in the first place. But I never got fully into Global Offensive just because of where I was at in my life at that time. But these updates are looking sick and are a real reason to call this a Counter-Strike sequel. Valve launched 3 videos and a website to go over the new features. They're going with a sub-tick update system, which should allow for ultra accurate and responsive input, including movement, shooting, and throwing. They're updating maps, so classics are getting light makeovers, and some maps are getting really significant overhauls, but all maps are looking better. Not to mention they're adding tools to make it even easier to build custom maps. Finally, smoke grenades look cooler than ever. They're fully dynamic, volumetric objects that fill up space and react to the environment, including lighting, gunfire, and explosions. I should also point out that the audio is enhanced to be even more accurate. They said, quote, "The sounds have been reworked to better reflect the physical environment, be more distinct, and express more game state," end quote. Ever since the early days of Counter-Strike, audio has been an important part of the game, and so I can't wait to see how these updates affect the gameplay. Again, this is out in summer, but there is a very limited beta happening right now. Funny enough, it's not Steam Deck compatible despite CSGO being playable on deck. I do expect the full release to be playable, but for now, the beta is limited to Windows. In other news, it does appear that the Microsoft acquisition of Activision will be moving forward after the UK's Competition and Markets Authority has provisionally concluded that it will not result in a substantial lessening of competition in console gaming services because the cost to Microsoft of withholding Call of Duty from PlayStation would outweigh any gains from taking such action, end quote. Regardless of how you feel about that logic, as far as I understand, this was the biggest hurdle and Microsoft just cleared it. Like many others, I have mixed feelings about this merger. I don't really like to see so many IP and resources already go to an already large player with Microsoft, but I also kind of struggle to see where we should draw the line, and I'd really like to see Activision under new leadership, so this kind of seems like the best path forward. I do think that all of this trouble means we're unlikely to see such a big acquisition again anytime soon, especially for Microsoft, and I think Microsoft is going to focus on much smaller studios. Speaking of mergers, Atari has agreed to acquire one of my favorite studios, Night Dive. Night Dive are responsible for a series of excellently crafted remasters like Quake, Doom 64, Turok, and Power Slave. They're also working on the highly anticipated remake of System Shock, and to that end, I suppose this is a good fit for both companies. There are a number of ways to look at an acquisition like this one, and while I am worried about what this means for one of my favorite studios, I'm going to put my optimistic hat on and say that an injection of funds like this could really allow the studio to do more things they want to do and tackle more ambitious projects, just like that System Shock remake or even an original IP. Fortnite Creative 2.0 also launched this week, and if you didn't think Fortnite could get any bigger, this may be just a thing to prove you wrong. Creative 2.0 is basically an Unreal editor for Fortnite, and the things that people have been creating are absolutely phenomenal, ranging from a recreation of the Stanley Parable to classic maps from Call of Duty. It's gone so far that apparently there are creative teams racing to remake the original Fortnite in Fortnite. Listen, I've only played a handful of Fortnite myself, but my interest is piqued. Lots of games were announced last week, perhaps thanks to GDC and PAX East, but yeah, there are some really interesting games on the horizon. The announcement I'm most excited about from last week has no trailer whatsoever, but it does sound promising. There's a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game in development. It's inspired by action RPGs like God of War, and it's going to be authentic to the Last Ronin graphic novel, which is set in a future where only one of the turtles has survived. For some reason, we weren't told what studio is working on this game, and that's a really important factor for me, since the studio in charge of making this game could really make or break my excitement. Tenet of the Spark was announced, and it's an ambitious combat game where you play as a boxer who has been imbued with the power of his ancestors. The entire environment changes around you when you swap to your ancestors' powers, and the transition for this looks sick. I assume this is still a few years away, but I'm going to be watching this closely. Here's a weird game announcement. It's called Mind's Eye, and I guess it's a game inside another yet to be released game. You may or may not remember Everywhere, a title that was announced last year and is in development by a studio formed by some ex-GTA developers. In any case, it appears that Mind's Eye will be playable inside of Everywhere. Both of these titles are being advertised as two distinct AAA products. Mind's Eye is an episodic action adventure, and Everywhere is some sort of creative sandbox like Dreams. This is feeling aggressively ambitious for a new studio, so you're gonna have to color me skeptical, but I'm interested to see where it lands. Fort Solis is not a new announcement, but we did get a nice new trailer and some more info. There are no camera cuts, which is similar to games like God of War 2018 and Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. There are no load times or HUD, so they're going for that really immersive feel, and it's yet another sci-fi space horror thriller thing. Interestingly, it's built on Unreal Engine 5. The fact that it's UE5 makes me think it's not going to run well on Steam Deck, but hopefully that fear is unwarranted. Sludge Life 2 was announced, and to celebrate the original, Sludge Life was made available for free on Steam. It's worth checking out. It's a really weird but really good kind of vibey game with a unique art style. Alright, so what games are coming out this week and what came out last week? Let's fire through some new releases. This week is pretty exciting for game releases, with The Last of Us Part 1 being the biggest launch to keep in mind. I expect this to play well on deck, and I'm happy to see another Sony title on PC. Sifu finally gets its release to Steam. It's been on Epic Game Store for over a year now, but I'll be happy to have a native Steam version. The EGS version plays well on deck, so this should be a no-brainer. Speaking of Epic Games, Crime Boss Rocket City comes to EGS this week. I don't expect to be testing this one since I've pretty much stopped buying games from EGS now. I'm curious to see how it plays, especially on deck, but I'll have to rely on other people to tell me how that goes. Dredge is one of those prestige indie titles that's already received a ton of praise from the people that have played it. Check out this box quote from Rock Paper Shotgun. It says, quote, "Dripping with atmosphere and armed with several compelling story hooks, Dredge is an eldritch fishing tale that will have you hooked from the word go," end quote. I see what you did there, RPS. Anyway, it's already deck verified, and SDHQ gave it their coveted Best on Deck badge, so this seems like a must buy. Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon is a dark fantasy open world RPG that's giving shades of Oblivion, and I am here for it. There was a demo for this one and people seem to take really well to it, so I expect this to get good reception at launch this Thursday, and I also expect it to play well on Steam Deck. Lunark is probably my personal most anticipated game of the week. It's billed as a modern take on the cinematic platformer, and that sounds like exactly my type of jam. The pixel art is gorgeous and it looks like the perfect game for the Steam Deck. On the subject of pixel art, 9 Years of Shadows has some of the prettiest pixel art I've ever seen, and also looks like a perfect Steam Deck game. It's a Metroidvania, and the score features legendary composers from the Castlevania and Metal Gear Solid series, so this definitely looks like a lot of love was poured into it. Ravenbound is a fast-paced action roguelite set in a dark fantasy world inspired by Scandinavian folklore. The studio's previous games have enjoyed a mostly positive reception, but I'm hoping this game is good enough to bring them into the very positive territory. If you like Akira, chances are good that you're going to be interested by Gripper. It's a boss rush where you fight all your foes from your cyberpunk bike. Instead of Doom's Rip and Tear, Gripper is all about grip and rip. Use the bike's hook uniquely with the environment to find ways to take out each boss. Consider me interested. And this is Terra Nil. I love the look of this city builder. Actually, it's a reverse city builder because the goal is to restore nature. People that played the demo for this on the Steam Deck have reported a good experience, so I would expect this to be at least playable. For games that already released last week, well, we already discussed Resident Evil 4, which came out on Friday. Not much to say I haven't already said. It plays well on deck, it receives great reception, and is the most played Resident Evil game on Steam so far. Have a Nice Death left early access last week. It's a 2D action roguelike with very positive reception, and it's verified on Steam Deck. If you want an endlessly replayable Hollow Knight, this is worth checking out. Deceive Inc. is a well-made spy game that appears to play great on deck despite its usage of Easy Anti-Cheat. If you like Among Us or old Assassin's Creed multiplayer, you're gonna enjoy this clandestine shooter. Mr. Saito is a charming RPG that can be finished in a few hours. There's a Studio Ghibli quality to this game, and there are some serious topics, but it's all approached in a lighthearted way. Reportedly, it plays well on deck, and it gets very positive reception on Steam. Storyteller is the latest game from one of my favorite indie publishers in Annapurna. This is a charming puzzle game where the goal for each level is to make a story with the settings, characters, and places provided to you. It does have mixed reception, but by all accounts, it's a good game that's just too short, so maybe wait for a sale if you want to play it, but are turned off by short games. Quick shout out to my patrons who help me make some of the best Steam Deck content out there. If you want to be part of the crew, be sure to sign up at the link below. Deck Gang out. Goodbye!